a scream echoing in the silence of the palace, the destiny of a woman, and a struggle for the throne of an empire, from Kefalonia to Topkapi. This is the story of that legendary figure who ruled the Ottomans not with her beauty, but with her intelligence and ruthless strategies. Kösem Sultan. The ambition born from the heart of a slave, the power that shaped the destiny of 3 sultans, and finally, the last web spun by her own sons. Are you ready to witness the life of one of history's most powerful women? This is not just the story of a sultana, but of the bloody and captivating dance of power. The year is 1590. In the heart of the Aegean, on a Greek island where mountains are woven with soft veins of marble, where the grape harvests race with the wind, and where blue and white embrace. Kefalonia. As the sun rises, church bells ring, bread ovens smoke in front of small houses, and women carry grapes from the vineyards. That morning was ordinary for the villagers, but for a little girl named Anastasia, it was the beginning of her destiny. This child, running through the streets in a light blue, embroidered linen dress her mother had made, was unaware that she would one day write her name into the heart of an empire. Her face was as bright as moonlight, her eyes as deep as silent seas. But beauty was the simplest of her virtues. What truly drew attention was the extraordinary intelligence, memory, and curiosity she displayed even at a young age. But that year, Ottoman ships docked on the island's shores. The captains did more than just collect taxes. In collaboration with local pirates, slave traders rounded up many Greek girls and children. Anastasia, too, became part of that chained caravan of fate. She was taken to Istanbul not crying, but standing tall, swallowing her tears. For even at that age, she understood, to accept without resistance what you cannot escape is sometimes the first step to victory. When she was brought to Topkapi Palace, she was first sent to the novice concubine school in Galata. Here, she learned to read the Quran, speak Ottoman Turkish, and studied classical Arabic literature, sewing, music, and the etiquette of the harem. While the other girls were shy and timid, she learned in tranquility, observed, and took mental notes. Her teachers said of her, she was like a silent snake, not dangerous, but with a spirit that never forgot anyone who touched it. Her rise in the palace hierarchy did not take long. One day, she was chosen by the head woman of the imperial harem, who deemed her beautiful but simple. However, when palace officials noticed both her beauty and her intellect, they included her in a more exclusive group. She was no longer an ordinary concubine, but a talent being groomed for the higher echelons of the palace. Finally, one day, in the golden-gated chambers of the harem, she was introduced to a young, slender, and quiet-gazed sultan. Ahmed I, Kösem's destiny was now irrevocably sealed. Topkapi Palace. This is the heart of a state where the Bosphorus wind caresses marble courtyards, where a secret lies hidden beneath every stone, a place ruled not by eyes, but by ears. And in the middle of that heart, in one of the most protected parts of the palace, the imperial harem, the young Sultan Ahmed is engulfed in a deep loneliness. Having ascended to the throne at just 14, Ahmed carried the bloody legacy of his father, Mehmed III, on his shoulders, struggling with fears from his childhood. The strangulation of his older brother Mahmud, the death cries of the princes, the pressure from his mother, Handan Sultan. He had nurtured them all within himself. He was a gentle-souled sultan, fond of poetry, who stayed away from alcohol and debauchery. And one evening, as he murmured the lines, "My fate is dark, my heart is wounded," alone in his chamber, the harem eunuchs entered. Among them was one whose golden hair defied the night, but whose tranquil eyes pierced the soul like the morning call to prayer, Mapikar. At first glance, Ahmed felt nothing for her, but on the second look, as he tried to decipher what lay behind those deep eyes, he felt, for the first time, a release from the loneliness of being a sultan. There was much beauty in the palace, but intelligence. Mapaiker could both remain silent and make one think. Their meetings became more frequent. They would read poetry together at night and discuss matters of state in the morning. Mapaiker had noticed the loneliness inside Ahmed. She approached him not just as a consort, but as a partner of the mind, a companion in strategy. And finally, in a move contrary to palace traditions, Sultan Ahmed declared her not just a favorite, but officially his Hasiki Sultan. The women of the harem were astonished. This was no longer a concubine, but a woman, a sultana. It was then that she received the name Kösem. It meant the female sheep that leads the flock. But her flock was a nation, and the path she walked was an empire. After Harem Sultan, the tradition of near monogamy began to take hold in the palace once more. Ahmed showed no interest in any other woman. Kösem's children were born one after another. Prince Mehmed, Prince Murad, Prince Ibrahim, and her daughters Ais and Fatma. But Kösem was not just a mother. While raising her children in the palace, she also carefully watched the changing of grand viziers, the restlessness of the janissaries, the stance of the ulama, and the alliances of the other women in the harem. She committed every move, every word to her memory as if taking notes. For she knew, in this palace, love is fleeting, but power is eternal. The footsteps echoing through the dim corridors of Topkapi Palace at dawn were no longer just those of concubines, but also of the Sultan's children. Kösem Sultan's heart was now filled not only with intrigue and splendor, but with motherhood. But in the Ottoman palace, motherhood was more than loving a child. It was about protecting, planning, and, when necessary, sacrificing one's own feelings. The birth of Prince Mehmed brought her great joy. Prince Murad, who followed, drew attention from his first glance with his stern and determined gaze. Kösem was bound to each of her children with a different bond. But the one who made her ponder the most was the quietest one, Prince Ibrahim. He seemed to have emerged from a world of fear, a child who always hid behind his mother's skirt. Kösem did not content herself with just loving her children. She prepared them for the future. She had their lessons checked every morning, carefully selected their tutors, and alongside literature and Quranic studies, she told them small stories about the affairs of state. But the palace was not a peaceful place for children. Sultan Ahmed, despite his young age, carried the weight of politics. The state was at war with Persia. The Salali rebellions continued in Anatolia. The streets of Istanbul were filled with hunger and gossip. And in the palace, another storm was approaching. Who would inherit the throne? Ahmed had ended the practice of fratricide. He envisioned a system where the eldest prince would ascend the throne. But this new tradition was a threat to Kösem. For Osman, the son of Ahmed's other consort, Mahfuz, was older, and the throne would go to him. Kösem Sultan harbored no ill will towards this child, but she did not stand down for her own sons. Two camps had formed within the palace. On one side, Kösem and her children. On the other, Osman and his supporters. The women were playing chess even as they glanced at each other in their mourning robes. Ahmed was more devoted to Kösem than ever, but his early death would turn everything upside down. The winter of 1617. Sultan Ahmed passed away at the age of 27. A heavy silence fell over Istanbul. When his body was interred at the Sultanate Mosque, the people wept. But Kösem did not cry. A place inside her had turned to ice. She buried her tears in the depths of the palace. Because now, she was not just a widow, not just a bereaved Hasiki sent to the old palace, but a mother who had sworn to one day become the Valide Sultan. On a cold morning in 1617, the harem eunuchs woke Kösem Sultan with whispers. She was now a widow. According to the ancient tradition of the palace, upon a sultan's death, his Hasikis were sent to the old palace. This was not merely a change of location, but a decree of being cast into the shadows. As the morning call to prayer sounded, Kösem said goodbye to her children. Prince Murad, in particular, clung to his mother's neck and cried. Kösem hid her tears and held her head high, because this separation had to be temporary. The old palace, Sarai Attic, was a quiet and cold structure, far from the ostentatious and political atmosphere of Topkapi. But for Kösem Sultan, silence was not the sound of defeat, but the background music for patiently woven plans. Every night, she roamed the corridors of the palace in her mind like an old map. Which vizier sides with whom? Why are the Janissaries restless? On which front does the Sheikh al-Islam stand? Since her sons were still young, Sultan Ahmed's brother, Mustafa, ascended the throne. But Mustafa was mentally unstable, living more with his fears than with his rule. He was dethroned after only a few months. This time, the palace circles made a different choice. Young Osman II, was brought to the throne. He was the son of her rival Mafruz Hatun, not Kösem's. For Kösem, this was a second blow. But she neither wept nor lamented, because she had made a promise to herself, "One day, I will be the Valide, and the reins of this state will pass through my hands." Young Osman was well educated. He had a reformist spirit. However, he was young, inexperienced, and had underestimated the power of the people, the Janissaries, and the ulama. Unrest grew in Istanbul, and the army was dissolving in indiscipline. And finally, in 1622, with a Janissary rebellion, young Osman was dethroned. The revolt took such a turn that Osman was strangled to death in the Yedikule dungeons. When that moment came, Kösem Sultan was summoned back to the palace. Because the new sultan was to be her young son, the 11-year-old Prince Murad. And so, as Kösem Sultan returned to Topkapi Palace, she was walking not just between stone walls, but into the very heart of power. What she carried with her was not just Prince Murad. It was 10 years of patience, strategy, knowledge, and determination. In 1623, a small boy walked silently in the throne room of Topkapi Palace. He wore an atlas kaftan, a plumed turban on his head, and in his eyes, a curiosity mixed with fear. He was Murad IV. He was only 11 years old, and suddenly, he had become the sultan of one of the world's greatest empires. But everyone knew, the real power was in someone else's hands. The Valide Sultan Kösem. Kösem was now not only the Valide Sultan, but also the Nabi Sultanate, the de facto regent of the Sultanate. Such an official and open display of female authority in Ottoman history had previously only been a dream plotted behind the scenes by Harem Sultan. There were whispers in the domes of the palace. Is a woman now ruling the state? Yes. But a woman who arranged pashas like chess pieces, spoke to the Sheikh al-Islams with an elegant but firm tone, pacified the Janissaries with rewards, and unraveled the rebellions strangling the state thread by thread. Kösem's regency was not a peaceful period. The Salali rebellions continued in Anatolia. Diplomatic balances were tense with the Safavids in the east, and Poland and Austria in the west. And in Istanbul, the Janissaries were now dissatisfied with everything. In this complex environment, Kösem carefully chose her statesmen. She brought down some viziers and brought others closer to the palace. But most importantly, she waited for her son Murad to grow up, because she knew that one day, this child would face not only his enemies but also his mother. Murad grew. When he reached adolescence, the child in his eyes gave way to a fiery gaze, to suspicion, and a desire for power. He developed a fondness for alcohol. At night, he would roam the streets of Istanbul in disguise, inspecting the populace, sometimes even dispensing punishment with his own hands. This was his infamous era of prohibitions. Tobacco, alcohol, coffeehouses, all were banned. Those who violated the bans were punished mercilessly. Kösem Sultan began to worry about her son's growing cruelty. Their relationship, once one of mother-son affection, had now transformed into a power struggle. For Murad no longer wanted to remain in his mother's shadow. He wanted to prove to the entire world that he was the true sultan. And Kösem, as she always did, maintained her power by remaining silent, by observing, by withdrawing when necessary, and by whispering when the time was right. Murad IV was suspicious of his brothers. Prince Mehmed, one of the eldest, had become a threat to him, and one night, the muffled footsteps echoing in the palace left behind an executioner, a silence, and a mother's stifled scream. Prince Mehmed was strangled. Kösem Sultan said nothing that night, but the next morning, as she walked through the grand courtyard of the palace, new lines had formed under her eyes. Her son had killed her own son. By 1640, Murad IV was physically exhausted and spiritually worn out, despite his young age. His alcoholism and internal diseases took their toll. One morning, as the call to prayer sounded in Topkapi Palace, Sultan Murad IV was no longer alive, and now Kösem's son Ibrahim would ascend the throne. But this new sultan was, for his mother, both a crown and a harbinger of a future catastrophe. As the morning fog rose from the Bosphorus, a whisper spread from within the palace. Sultan Murad is dead. But the second sentence that immediately followed brought the shadows back to the palace corridors. The new sultan is Sultan Ibrahim. There was fear in the palace, because Ibrahim had lived for years in a cage, in fear of death, during the reign of his brother Murad. He had heard the executioner's footsteps so many times that the lines between reality and imagination had blurred. That is why he initially refused to ascend the throne. "They want to put me on the throne and then kill me." Kösem Sultan came and took her son's hands. "No harm will come to you as long as I am alive," she said. And so, with a sultan pulled out from within a frightened child, a new era of the Ottoman Empire began. When Sultan Ibrahim ascended the throne, he was not in a state to rule. The people, the janissaries, the pashas, and even the palace eunuchs knew this. Therefore, all eyes turned to the same woman once again, Kösem Sultan. She was now the regent for the second time. This was a situation that few women in history would ever experience. The first time, her son was a child. Now, she wielded power in the shadow of a ruler whose sanity was fragile. During this period, Kösem tried to maintain balance in foreign policy and quell internal unrest. The appointments of grand viziers, provincial administrations, and tax regulations all passed through her for approval. However, another problem was growing within the palace: Ibrahim's unstable personality. Over time, Sultan Ibrahim lost his grip on reality. Some days he would shower the concubines in the harem with pearls. Other days he would have the palace walls demolished and rebuilt. Once, he wanted to bathe in the oil of a whale, believing it would bring good luck. Kösem Sultan tried to manage the situation each time. But Ibrahim no longer trusted even his mother. The flatterers, viziers, and harem eunuchs surrounding him tried to poison him against Kösem. "The Valide is demeaning you. She is in your place." One night, Sultan Ibrahim, in a fit of rage, expelled his mother's envoys from the palace. Kösem watched what was happening in silence. But this silence was the preparation for her final, great move. By 1648, a rebellion broke out in Istanbul. The janissaries, the ulama, and the people were fed up with the sultan's instability. A name was whispered in the streets: Kösem Valide. She is the mind of the state. The sultan changes with her signal. Kösem Sultan gave her consent for her son's deposition. And soon after, Sultan Ibrahim was dethroned and taken to the Yedikule dungeons. There, a few weeks later, he was strangled to death. The palace fell silent once more. Kösem Sultan placed a sultan on the throne for the third time. This time, her grandson, Mehmed IV. But this time, she faced an unfamiliar rival, Mehmed IV's mother, Turhan Sultan, a young, beautiful woman dedicated not only to motherhood but also to power. The tension that arrived at Topkapi Palace with the morning breeze had now seeped into its walls. The newly enthroned Mehmed IV was only 7 years old, and this, once again in Ottoman history, meant the rule of women. But this time there was not just one woman. Kösem Sultan, mother of 3 sultans, the hidden mind of an empire, was now old but still determined. On the other side, the young, ambitious, and beautiful Turhan Sultan was beginning to shine in the shadow of the throne as the mother of Mehmed IV. Both held the title of Valide Sultan, but the palace could not be run by 2 shadows. According to tradition, Kösem once again assumed the title of regent due to her grandson's young age. Thus, she was again the de facto ruler of the state. However, Turhan Sultan did not remain silent. Using her youth, her beauty, and her supporters among the new generation of ulama and janissaries, she slowly began to counterbalance Kösem's influence within Topkapi Palace. Every morning in the harem there was tranquility, but in every glance, the sound of a battle. Kösem had experience. Turhan had time. Kösem was worried about her grandson Mehmed for becoming sultan at such a young age. Sometimes, sacrifices were necessary for the good of the state, and this sacrifice could even be the replacement of the sultan. According to some sources, Kösem Sultan told her supporters, if Turhan cannot protect her son, a more suitable prince should take the throne. This sentence spread through the palace like a cold wind. The whispers grew. There were allegations. Kösem had prepared a plan to have Mehmed IV killed, and these whispers reached the ears of Turhan Sultan directly. It was the middle of the night. Kösem Sultan was alone in her chamber in the old palace. The lamp on the wall burned with a flickering light, her tired eyes following the shadows. There was movement in the palace that night. Harem eunuchs silently approached Kösem's chambers. The door creaked open. Historians always recount that moment in a whisper. Valide Sultan, the time has come. Did Kösem resist? No. It is rumored that she only said, I gave my sons, I gave the state. It seems it is now my turn. That night, for the first time, the walls of the palace wept. Kösem Sultan was strangled to death. Her body was secretly removed from the palace before dawn. Then, she was buried in the tomb of her beloved Sultan Ahmed. The palace fell silent, but Kösem's name was etched into Ottoman history. She was not just a sultan's mother. She was a political mind, a master of intrigue, a legend of patience, a woman of power. She reigned at the zenith of the Sultanate of women. In the palace she entered as a concubine. She wrote the destinies of 3 sultans. And in the end, she met her own death as a result of a political reckoning. As the morning wind swirled in the courtyards of Topkapi Palace, an era had ended. The palace walls no longer whispered the name of Kösem Sultan, but a shadow of her remained on every stone, every curtain, in every room. The morning she died, it was not just a woman who passed. An age too was closing. Kösem Sultan's body was interred in the tomb of the Sultan Ahmed Mosque, beside her husband. She now lies beneath the marble, but the echo of her name has wandered for centuries through the darkest and most magnificent chambers of Ottoman history. In the palace she came to as a slave, she determined the fate of an empire. Her name was written in history with the heart of a mother, the intellect of a vizier, and the composure of a ruler. And perhaps the most tragic thing was this. A woman who had achieved infinite power was ultimately strangled to be forgotten in the silence of a single night. But that night, the stone walls of Istanbul never forgot one thing. Kösem Sultan did not remain in the past. She continued to reign in the heart of history. With Kösem's death, the Sultanate of women in the Ottoman Empire slowly lost its power. The Valide sultans who came after her, including Turhan Sultan, were influential, but none could become a force like her, who determined the fate of 3 sultans and effectively ruled the state. Kösem was not only a Valide sultan but also a political architect. She left her mark in every field, from her regulations in the harem and her contributions to the concubine education system, to the appointments of tutors and the selection of grand viziers. Among the people, Kösem has become a legend. Some speak of her as a cursed woman, while others remember her with blessings as if in prayer. Some legends even speak of a power that rises from her grave. In palace stories, her name is always mentioned with caution. Yet, throughout her life, she was loyal to only one thing: power. And she ruled that power not with her intelligence alone, but with her silence, her patience, her calculations, and, when necessary, by swallowing her tears. If you liked the video and want more videos like this to come, you can support me by subscribing and hitting the like button. Thank you for watching.